Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barry Ramey, and I am the co founder of WeTheJ6ers.com. We have formed an organization that is telling the stories of the men and women behind January 6th, whose voices for so long now have been censored and not been allowed to tell their story. And while that was happening, an egregious lie was being told about them, that these men and women who went to the Capitol on January 6th are domestic terrorists, are racist nationalists, are violent insurrectionists. And we look to be able to show beyond a reasonable doubt that none of these narratives are in fact true. So as we move forward with WeTheJ6ers.com, we're going to be bringing you the interviews of the men and women that were involved, prosecuted, sentenced. Some of them went to prison. And we're going to let you see for yourselves. And in some instances, maybe that you get to a conclusion that you don't agree with these individuals. You don't think that their actions were very copacetic that day. But I rest assured knowing that in the end of watching our videos and seeing these men and women with your own eyes and open mind, you're going to see that they're not domestic terrorists. And that brings us to our second mission of WeTheJ6ers.com. We look to travel around the country, telling our stories, and also exposing the egregious unconstitutional behavior that is the Patriot Act and how we must, as an American people, end it for all sides of the political demographic and spectrum. The Patriot Act is an egregious unconstitutional piece of legislation that should not be allowed to exist. And the spying on American citizens and what's being done to them behind closed doors is should not be allowed to continue. And that is what we aim to come forward and expose. So we are a speaking agency on short, and we have many layers to us, but speaking engagements are one of our main priorities. And we look to travel the country and talk about how we, the people, can unite to make sure the weaponization of the Department of Justice can never happen again, and undoing the damage that's already been done because it was and is in fact weaponized. My story has many layers. I am a January 6th defendant. I was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison after beating the two most serious charges at my bench trial and having them downgraded to two things that I was never arguing. Although I will argue I did not assault the second officer. I did, and I am guilty of assaulting the first one. I do not condone my behavior. I wish I could take it back. And I say this forthcoming because I, unlike so many other of my fellow brothers and sisters in January 6th, am guilty of that. I didn't have to do it. Donald Trump didn't make me do it. The Proud Boys didn't make me do it. Nobody made me do it. The story that doesn't get told is the 35 minutes prior to me getting into a physical altercation and assaulting a Capitol Police officer. Is the men and women I watched be assaulted by the Capitol Police. But that is a story in and of itself and for another day. And we will be getting into that on WeTheJ6ers.com. So I highly encourage you to like, subscribe, and share, and be a part of this journey as we're just getting started and growing at the time of this video. I'm going to fast forward through many parts of my story, and I'm going to tell them in increments and sections, and they're not going to really be in chronological order. And I'm not really doing this for any particular reason other than that the stories are fresh in my head. I'll never forget them. And, in sections, I think that because our ultimate point of doing this project is to expose the corruption and the weaponization of the DOJ and the Bureau of Prisons, it really doesn't matter what order I go in. And I would encourage you to follow along again and hear my whole story, and we can go from there. So I was sentenced, as I was saying, to 60 months in federal prison for assault on a federal officer. I was put through a process in the Bureau of Prisons called diesel therapy. What diesel therapy is a process that Bureau of Prisons utilizes alongside of its counterpart, its mothership, the Department of Justice, and it is strictly to break an inmate or a person facing trial down to be more likely to accept the plea. And in my personal opinion, along with many other people, uh, this is a form of torture. It is not constitutional. It costs $2,000 to $10,000 to move an inmate from place to place, and the taxpayer pays for that. But I was moved 14 times in 16 months. Finally designated to FCI Miami, and I'm going to start my story out at FCI Miami because it really gets into the Patriot Act and why it's so important that we address this issue as a nation, and how easy anybody in power can utilize its language to do that, to weaponize it against their political opponents. So when I got to FCI Miami, I was pulled into a room by an SIS officer, Harper. SIS Officer Harper was openly bragging to me right off the bat, of his a situation where he assaulted another January Sixer that goes by the live streaming name of Baked Alaska, who had just left the facility prior to me getting there. He talked about how he roughed him up because he had the audacity to let him know that he knew something about the Constitution. He was clearly trying to intimidate me and let me know that he had no problems putting his hands on me. Um, I He was very concerned with me talking to the media. At this time, there was another J6er there, John Strand, and John Strand was going through it. The prison was putting John Strand through it, but I'll get into what I mean here momentarily. But I didn't know John Strand at the time or what he was actually going through. But they were really concerned with me talking to the media, and he made that very clear that I was not allowed to talk to the media. That if I wanted to talk to the media, that I needed to get permission from my case manager. So, I kind of put his clause, had him retract his clause by letting him know, look, man, I have no intention of talking to the media. I'm, just here to do my time. I want to go home. I have a sick mother. And, that was that. He made a few comments about Trump and let me know. I could tell that he was not a big fan of him. But so things would start to get a little weird. There was a moment I was trying to teach a class on the Constitution in the prison. If anybody that's listening to this that has gone to prison heard me say that, they are already laughing because they know how that went. It was immediately denied. Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, my fiance had informed a few people that I was going to try to teach a class on the Constitution at prison. And somebody made a comment on her Truth Social page that they were happy to hear that I was doing that and utilizing the time in prison properly. Well, I was flagged down by this same SIS officer the very next day and asking me who I was talking to that was talking that made a post on my fiance social media page on True Social. I had no idea what he was talking about. And then it dawned on me, oh, they're monitoring my fiance social media. Well, a lot of the J6ers know, Mickey, the mother of Ashley Babbitt, did a vigil outside of DC jail every day for many, many moons. And we would call in and we would tell our stories and talk to people, and people would hear our voices. Well, as I was told by this officer Harper at FCI Miami to get permission from my case manager if I ever wanted to talk to the media or do any kind of phone call like that, I asked my case manager. I told him that I wanted to call into a live vigil and that I wanted to use the inmate phone to do so and was seeking his permission. He said, no problem. Go ahead and do it. So I made the call into the vigil and I talked to Mickey and everyone. And the next day I was called to the lieutenant's office where I was handcuffed and thrown into the specialty housing unit, which is ultimately solitary confinement, because they were now accusing me of talking to the media. I tried to tell them that I did not, that I didn't, that I got permission from my case manager, as I was instructed to do by one of the same officers handcuffing me and take me to the SHU. And they that weren't really hearing it. I told them about my case manager. They called my case manager allegedly and said that he doesn't remember giving me permission. So now, okay, it's very clear I'm being set up here. I'm now going into the specialty housing unit. You know, you're stripped naked, given a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, thrown into a cell with a mat, and that's it. And that's where I would run into John Strand, who had been in the shoe now for quite some time, because they were accusing him of talking to the media, the same thing they were accusing me of. And John was really distraught. You know, he was very upset. They weren't really attending to him, giving him proper food, not taking care of him, just leaving them there to rot. He'd been there for now months. And so the next Monday after the weekend, my case manager came in and fortunately remembered me asking permission to do this call. So I end up getting a write-up, and the write-up says that I called in to a vigil that was live recording within earshot of the DC inmates from January 6th that haven't gone to trial yet. Anyone that was in that situation knows that's an egregious lie. They're nowhere near the building. They moved them over a year and a half before this situation. This is when I was informed that I was being monitored by the counterterrorism unit of the Bureau of Prisons. In fact, all January Sixers were. This is what Officer Harper told me. I wrote a letter to some people, which is not against Bureau of Prisons policy, and I was explaining to them my situation, and somebody published this letter online, and this letter made its way onto the Gateway Pundit. Now, again, none of that is against any Bureau of Prison policy. However, without me knowing it, in the middle of the night, I was handcuffed and thrown back into the specialty housing unit because allegedly the counterterrorism unit of the Bureau of Prisons called FCI Miami and told them that I was speaking to the media. I was kept in the shoe for multiple days without even being told why I was in there. Finally, the warden came back to work and looked at what was being alleged that I did and realized this is not what had happened, and put me and had me removed from the specialty housing unit. At this time, I got a new case manager and was transferred to a different unit. And this case manager was pretty pro MAGA, and she was looking into some things. And come to find out, yes, the counterterrorism unit was told to monitor us, and she never said this directly, but every indication would say that this Officer Harper was exaggerating the extent that they were actually involved. He was constantly threatening me, and that they were monitoring me, and I was going to be shipped to a maximum security unit if I talked to the media. And he was being told to do this and tell this to me, and he claims that he really wasn't, for it. But nonetheless, I was under constant harassment. One day, probably the most nefarious and scary things happened. I was called to the lieutenant's office with this Officer Harper, and he would tell me that he had a stack of papers an inch thick, and he told me that the counterterrorism unit had a file and were monitoring my fiance's social media, which I had previously thought. And he had screenshots and posts of all her social media. And now, mind you, my fiance was not at January 6th. She was not accused of being at January 6th. She was not in DC that day. And they were monitoring her social media from inside the Bureau of Prisons. They threatened me that if I don't go back to the inmate phone and call her and have her remove a post that had a video that she made with our little dog in it, that was pro-Trump and anti-Biden. If I didn't have her remove that, they were going to ship me to Terre Haute and to the communications monitoring unit. And again, they had a stack of papers this thick of her social media. They were openly telling me they were monitoring my fiance's social media. This is in the Bureau of Prisons. Their jurisdiction ends there. Those who are in prison in their custody, they should not have the funding, the ability, or the legality or legal standing to be monitoring anybody outside of the Bureau of Prisons. And yet they were doing that not only to me, but to a lot of us. And I would encourage a lot of my fellow J6ers to start to get the FOIA requests. I will get into the story on another little episode about Julio Boquero, a J6er who passed away of stage 4 gastric cancer in the care of FCI Miami. But what I will talk about now is that same medical department at FCI Miami that allowed Julio's situation to become what it was, and for it not to be able to be treated and him pass away. But the same medical department is a sham, and it goes to the broader conversation that we hope to have at WeTheJ6ers.com with reforming the Bureau of Prisons. Just on the surface, even though there's many more surfaces and layers, that just in the service of what they're doing and wasting the taxpayer dollars. And a situation that I lived and have the receipts to show is I went and got my first physical in 3 years of being at the Bureau of Prisons custody, maybe the second. And it was right before I was getting ready to go to the halfway house on a GPS monitor. And I was with, I would say, approximately 38 to 42 other inmates from other units that were having the same thing done. One doctor, and these inmates were going in, and approximately 5 minutes each, if at best, they would come out. And I was probably close to within the last 10 to go. And same thing with me. I went into this doctor's office. He asked me what my weight was. I said I wasn't sure. I'd been gaining weight, and he put me on the scale. I weighed myself, told him the weight. He took my blood pressure, and that was it. And I've been collecting the data and my medical records from the prison the entire time I've been there, and I went and got the notes that he took for my physical. And this doctor claimed that he had done all kinds of tests, spinal, cranial, abdomen tests, blood tests, that he did all kinds of psychiatric questioning, all kinds of, he said my temperature was 98.3 degrees, never took my temperature. Each one of these tests is being funded by the taxpayer. There was multiple tests on mine. Again, I have the receipts. Multiple tests this Dr. Alacrone from FCI Miami produced, multiple tests that he said he did that he never did. The taxpayer pays for each one of them. Now, when I was doing my physical, there was at least 38 to 42 guys. This goes on every week at every prison. Who's checking the books? This is just one element of why the J6ers should be interviewed by members of the Doge team, because we can point to all kinds of places to look where they can't hide for years and years and years. They've been robbing the taxpayer. Recidivism levels are up through the roof because the Bureau of Prisons is taking massive amounts of taxpayer dollars and saying that they're using them for programs to rehabilitate inmates, to reacquaint them back into society, to give them a better chance at being productive members of it. There's a lot of prisons, including FCI Miami, that are taking this money, claiming to offer these programs, and they don't offer the programs. FCI Miami is very complacent in this declaration that I'm making about them. And I can show people where to look. And you know who else could? Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro wrote a nice letter to the warden that I actually have a copy of. And I will be reading it one day soon. And what is going on in the Bureau of Prisons with the First Step Act and the money that they're robbing the taxpayers is just another layer of why it's so important. And our mission at WeTheJ6ers.com is to go from coast to coast and talk to the people about what is happening and how we can band together to fix it. And FCI Miami is a not a very good place. It's not overly violent. In all prisons, violence is a thing, but it's not overly violent. But there's a lot of corruption going on there, and I don't just mean officers bringing stuff in. That's probably the least of what I'm talking about as far as FCI Miami. I'm talking about egregious misspending and misappropriation of federal funding from the U.S. payers, tax dollars, and all anyone would ever have to do is scratch the surface. But as always, who's going to do it? We don't know. Um, uh, I have a lot to go on as far as FCI Miami is concerned. I could speak for days and days and days. I'm hoping to be interviewing John Strand, I was in the shoe and got to witness a lot of the things that were done to him by these same officers that I'm indicting in my testimonies. Um, we were put through the ringer. We were harassed just for being J6ers. Lieutenant Gonzalez would go in my cell and throw away all the pictures of Trump that I had or any pro-America things that I had. And not all officers were bad. There were some really good ones. Some I'd really like to go have a fucking beer with one day. But it is what it is. Um, we we are at a defining moment in our country that if we do not stand up and speak out against what our government is doing behind closed doors, then we're not going to have a country going forward. And I think it is imperative of all January Sixers to use their voice in the very limited amount of platform that we have given to us because of this situation to affect change beyond just our own plights in life. Sure, we suffered. Sure, we went through a ringer, but let's stop it for all Americans in America. That's the aim of WeTheJ6ers.com, because there's legislation in place, the Patriot Act, that needs to be stopped and taken down. And unless Americans educate themselves onto what it actually is and what it says in it that allows the bureaucrats to operate in the shadows the way they do, then there's not really much we can do about it, because knowledge is power. And again, WeTheJ6ers.com. We are a booking agency for January Sixers. We have everybody from Kelly Meigs from the Oath Keepers, Robert Lego Man Moores, Enrique Tario of the Proud Boys, myself, Barry Ramey, and Zachary Rail from the Seditious Five, and several other guys that are very good at articulating their points and have a broader message than just themselves in January 6th, a message of love for America, love for this country, and why it's worth fighting for. So thank you for taking the time. I encourage you to like, share on X at We The J6ers, at all platforms at We The J6ers. Follow, like, subscribe, share, and help us grow. And so we can get our voices out there that to the people to see, okay, you may not agree with us. That's okay. But the fact that we were labeled as domestic terrorists, that's the problem. And I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody in this country, no matter who they vote for, what side of the political spectrum they're on, that these things can't just be slung about so freely to affect the lives of our fellow American citizens just because we don't like who they vote for. With that being said, I'm Barry Ramey, the co-founder of WeTheJ6ers.com. Check out our website. Follow our social media handles at WeTheJ6ers. Thank you for taking the time to watch. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Always stand for the anthem. Unless you play for the NFL, never take a knee to communism.